Guys, if you are thinking about moving to Florida or even vacationing in Florida, you have to know this because the problem has affected tourists as well as people who live there in Florida. From the beautiful retirement community, the Villages, to equestrian communities, Ocala, to Disney World, Orlando, it's widespread. There are more than 30,000 recorded sinkholes in Florida. These are only the ones that are recorded, and they call it a sinkhole epidemic in Florida. BBC released a documentary about it. They called it a deadly threat from Florida's Underworld. And just don't think that we're talking about little tiny holes. We're talking about massive, massive holes that can swallow up whole structures, whole houses, car dealerships, Olympic-sized swimming pools, apartment complexes. So it's a dangerous thing. And we all know sinkholes, they can lurk in the deep without us knowing. So especially underneath roads, the pavement holds it for a while, although it's washed out and hollow underneath. And the problem with these sinkholes is they're deep. They can go as deep as 500 feet, and then they can go very wide. So many people don't know this, but would you think that if you move to the Villages, that is a retirement community with a lot of golf carts to reduce traffic. They have their own little microcosm. It's like with stores, restaurants, live music, golf courses, recreation centers. So it's absolutely beautiful, and it's a very favorable retirement community in Florida. The Villages, that's a little more south of Orlando, Ocala area, Marion County, but basically it is still Central Florida, I would say. So there are even official maps of all the sinkholes. So it's an interactive map that you can check out these sinkholes. But what do they really do? Let's start with the Villages, and then I show you something even worse, where a man was swallowed up in his sleep, and a Disney World apartment complex. What happened there, guys? So this happens while you're sleeping in your house, apartment, condo, whatever. So the Villages, that's an interesting case with a house that has later even been sold.
But our top story tonight, sinkholes in the Villages. The fire chief there says that they first appeared yesterday morning, and thankfully they haven't gotten any bigger.
In this video, you can see just how close the sinkholes are to the pool at the Moyer Recreational Center in the Villages. This prompted the center to close.
The Times calls the sinkholes Florida's silent enemy. Yes, they are silent, and they can appear suddenly without a warning. So in 2018, that's a notable sinkhole case. That was after a long period of rain. All of a sudden, 4 massive sinkholes opened up around a pond, a golf course, but also a home. This is even reported in the Villages. They seem to have their own newspaper or something, the Village News. So they are talking about a home that's located at 17092 Southeast 79th McLaurin Terrace in the village of Calumet Grove. So they have within this the Villages retirement communities, they seem to have certain subdivisions. And why are they reporting about this? Because the home was back on the market in 2022 for roughly $500,000 US. So what happened? In 2018, these sinkholes opened and the home was occupied. So there was someone living in there, and the resident had to be rescued by firefighters after the residents reported a loud bang in the night. And when the sun was coming up, they saw that there was a massive sinkhole damage around the house. So they made a report in 2018 when that happened. They said the house wasn't salvageable and they should tear it down. So at least 2 engineering companies said that this home isn't salvageable and it needs to be torn down, probably because of foundation issues. But did they tear it down? So they're saying that there were many months when nothing happened. Residents of this subdivision where this home is located were then later hit with a 20% increase in their maintenance assessment to pay for repairs around the sinkhole site. So wow, everyone had to step in for this. So it seems the house was not torn down, and that's why they report about this. In 2022, that sinkhole damaged house in the Villages hit the market again, so they listed it. So what has been done? So I looked up the address on Zillow, and there you can see they listed the home for $525,000, and it looks like the same home. So it doesn't look to me that it was torn down and rebuilt. Also, if you look at the listing description, if you scroll down, it says further down, foundation stabilization report is available. So it looks what they have done is they have just stabilized the foundation. But is that enough? Because I want to tell you about a case where a sinkhole that swallowed a house with someone sleeping in it, and that sinkhole kept opening again. They filled it and it opened again and it opened again. So there is no security that if you fill up that sinkhole that it will really remain closed and not open up again, because there's underground structures and tunnel systems. So strengthening a foundation, a concrete foundation, when everything underneath it might be a Swiss cheese still or become again, doesn't really help it, because then the house was going to sink with the foundation, in my opinion, right, guys? So beware if you're thinking about buying real estate or even renting. You have to go back a long time, Google the address, look up all the listings, look up the, sometimes you find old listings, old listing descriptions, look up aerial pictures. There's GIS mapping systems, especially in the US, where you can see, if you're lucky, old aerial pictures, so you can see if something's happening there. You know, I always do that, and you can see things about properties. Have they burned down? Check the surroundings. Is there anything dangerous around these homes? Check aerial pictures, and especially beware if there's a lot of ponds. And if you look at aerial pictures, that's what the scientists are saying. If you look at central Florida, but it goes up to the panhandle, and all these round, especially when they're round, these nice little ponds that people have on their properties, they're most likely sinkholes. And even in downtown Orlando, where all the office buildings and condos are around that pond, I'll show you this later, it's a sinkhole. So if you scroll down on Zillow, that home was actually sold in 2022 in February for $525,000. The question is, did it really sell for that? Because it was pending a little earlier for $499,000. So Zillow is not always accurate. You can look that up in the property records, but it's not important. That's just whether it's like 25,000 more or less. It's just a fact. 4 years later, it has been sold. It has not been torn down. So if you're the buyer, if you know about this, if it's fully disclosed, well, you take your risk, right? But if you maybe don't know about this, then it's a problem. So check out neighborhoods, check out the ponds in the area. But I want to tell you about more. I want to tell you more about that topic. So what do you need to know about these sinkholes, especially in the Villages? I mean, the sinkholes are a fact of life, especially in Florida, but also in many other states in the US. But Florida is definitely the state that has the most. But unfortunately, also a place like the Villages that's quiet and peaceful is not immune to these sinkholes. So there have been several confirmed sinkholes in the Villages over the years. So not isolated incidences. There has been a sinkhole that has affected a recreation center. So Florida has more sinkholes, guys, than any other state. And this is because in many parts of Florida, the ground near the surface is sitting on top of limestone. So when the underground water levels rise, this limestone can dissolve and form holes. So when the ground below is no longer strong enough to support the weight of what is on top. That can be a house, a structure, or even just a car driving over the road, or you just walking over a golf course or over a piece of lawn. A sinkhole could open up, and they can happen anywhere. If you do your research on Florida, most experts tell you that north central and west central Florida is where they seem to occur most often. If you look at the sinkhole map here, it looks like the closer you get to Miami, the lesser of a problem it is. But around Orlando, Ocala, the Villages, Tampa, Gainesville, even into the Panhandle, it's everywhere. So what is happening? February in Florida is usually the month where it's raining the least. It's the driest month, but shortly after, it's also the start of the rainy season in Florida. And especially if it's acidic rain, it can wash away the limestone and the natural caverns that lie underneath most of Florida. So that is causing sinkholes. It's both. Extremely dry weather and very wet weather can trigger these sinkholes. Let's say we have an extreme drought. That can cause soil and sediment over a cavity to be extremely dry and then get brittle and collapse. But on the other hand, if there's a tropical storm or a hurricane or something like this that often goes over Florida, that is also when a lot of sinkholes are forming. For example, Tropical Storm Debbie in 2012, a lot of counties north of Tampa were seeing sinkholes because of the rain. And speaking about the villages, you have to do some research and you have to dig a little bit deeper because, of course, it is not a good advertisement if you think you're buying a home there in the villages and it's so safe there. It's really nice, has a very low crime rate. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So you don't want bad news too much out in the press. But there's reports that dates back as 2002 and it's still happening. So it's not ending. This is ongoing. But it's an interesting report from July 2002, for example, when they said that in the last 2 months, an estimated 20 sinkholes have opened in the villages. At that time, only 25,000 residents. It's gotten way more by now. So workers found a sinkhole that was 30 feet long. 30 feet, that's long. And it had suddenly opened. Just in the morning, poof, it was there. And then they had a 4-acre lake that had nearly disappeared. So the sinkhole was sucking the water down from that lake like a waterfall. That's what workers said. And they said that in some areas, the shoreline of this 4-acre lakes had receded by more than 30 feet. So the question is, was that lake artificial or was that lake originally already a sinkhole? Because where you already have many sinkholes, you have a large likelihood that more might open over time. So there were many residents that were quite upset about this. And they said, they have been told that it's all okay and that there's not a problem, but the residents already said at that time, but that's not the case. They just said the officials don't admit that it's not the first time that this is happening in this area. So there's reports crews were working to bolster the foundation of a newly built home with cement after a 12-foot wide sinkhole had opened there. So it seems it's not located to one specific subdivision. It appears in every subdivision. The engineers, of course, are saying they are facts of life in Florida and that the residents of that area have to learn to accept that. So many residents have the ground checked once a year underneath their homes. So that can get expensive, right? If you have to do this once a year, and is once a year really enough? Probably not. I don't know. I probably have to. I don't know if you can have permanent sensors in your homes or whatever. It's just scary. They're also reporting that at that time, a consultant to the villages had investigated about 300 sinkholes since the rainy season had began that year. Well, and of course, there's other people that are trying to profit from that. Maybe it is needed, I don't know. But there's websites of lawyers that are advertising if you have a problem with sinkholes, contact us. And it was interesting because one office has made, I'm not naming it because I don't want to make advertisement for them, but they released this year for insurance claims the Florida Sinkhole Safety Checklist, and they said what you need to know about sinkholes before moving to the villages. And in this article, really, you see the sinkhole here that has formed between two homes. So imagine the sinkhole had moved a little bit further down underneath the home. You could have been swallowed up like that man did. I'll tell you about this. So also what they said, well, moving to the villages can seem like a dream come true. The year-round warm weather, lower cost of living, vibrant retiree community attract many new residents every year. That is true, and it's absolutely gorgeous there. So they're saying few know that they could sit on a ticking time bomb called sinkholes. The village area has been affected by sinkholes for years now. That's what they're saying, and this is recent, February this year. They're mentioning the 3 large sinkholes that opened up in 2021 that appeared near a recreation center, causing the draining of pools and shutting down the recreation center. So they're urging you to inform yourselves before moving to the villages about the possible dangers of living in the area, and also ensure to have adequate insurance cover should something happen to your home. That is the other thing, protect your equity, but you know, I'd be more worried about the safety and the health of myself. So sometimes there's early warning signs for these sinkholes, although the actual collapse is mostly very, very sudden, but sinkholes can take weeks or even months to form. So if you're a homeowner, knowing the early signs of a sinkhole forming can be critical to protect yourself and your home, the family, right? So these warning signs could be cracks in the ground around your house. So if you notice that, beware. New cracks in the foundations of buildings, cracks in the road, or cloudy tap water, wilting plants, depressions in the yard, cracks in ceilings, fence posts or trees tilting, cracks in exterior stucco and internal house walls, windows or doors sticking. So in general, sinkholes in the villages do appear due to the geology in this part of Florida, of course. Floods and rainstorms can trigger these holes during the rainy season. And the rainy season basically runs from spring to early fall. But in some cases, if you have a nearby construction or water pumping, that can favor the development of sinkholes as well. So if you're buying a home in like older subdivisions where there's no space to build something new around it, maybe that's better with as little ponds as possible. But you know, it looks beautiful, all these lakes. People want to have lake view or lakefront. So let's say there's activity around your home, like construction of retention ponds, mining, underground water pumping, construction or repairs of roads, land development, and constructions of buildings that could favor the appearance of a sudden sinkhole. Well, and look at this picture here that the BBC has released. And like I said, they call it a deadly threat from Florida's Underworld. Look at this apartment complex. What if you had been in there at the time that this collapsed? And that's a resort building near Disney World. And it was basically sliding into a 60 feet wide sinkhole. That happened in 2013. Residents have described it that this building made really, really scary noises as if the building was alive. They said it was churning, moving around, making noises like a growl. Wow, because stuff is breaking and you know. So this incident happened in 2014, and then shortly before that in 2013, that was a really, really shocking incident. So there was an emergency call in a quiet suburban subdivision of Tampa, and the officers that first came to the scene, they described it that they came face to face with Florida's Underworld.
To the town of Seffner, Florida, near Tampa, where last night the earth opened up, as it does increasingly and thousands of times every year in this country. This time it swallowed a 37-year-old man as he slept in his home.
So they said that inside, you see the pictures, a detached bungalow, the ground had opened up and swallowed a man that was sleeping in his bed there. 37-year-old Jeff Bush was swallowed with his bed inside his home by this sinkhole.
In his bed 1 minute, gone the next.
All I see was the tops of his bed.
Jeremy Bush says he heard a loud crash, then his brother Jeffrey screaming late last night at their home near Tampa. He jumped into the massive hole in a desperate attempt to rescue his brother.
And I couldn't get him. All I could hear was, I thought I could hear him screaming for me and hollering for me to help him. I couldn't do nothing.
Remarkably, outside, the house looks like nothing happened, but inside.
The open hole is about 30 feet in diameter, and it's about 20 feet deep.
Well,
and his brother then tried frantically to dig him out. But Jeff's body was sucked into that sinkhole, and it was never to be found again. That's a very, very sad story. And the brother didn't want to stop searching for his brother, so the officers really kind of forcefully had to get him away from that dangerous spot. So they called that sinkhole a natural trapdoor that captured the sleeping man and made him vanish. Many people call Florida the sinkhole capital of the world. I don't know why Florida is a capital, but sinkhole area of the world. I only knew that they call it the center of the horse world in Ocala. But imagine, it's for me, having horses on the field, and all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and wait a minute, there's a few horses missing. Where are they? Nightmare, absolute nightmare. And interesting is, if you look at a picture of Jeff Bush's house from the outside, there's literally really no sign that there's a sinkhole in his bedroom that did swallow him. You don't really see it. And here's a picture after the house was demolished. There you see this massive sinkhole. So what I find especially scary is what a structural engineer has said. That guy has worked with the emergency workers at Jeff Bush's house. And so he basically said when the sinkhole opened and the soil started to fall inward, a suction force was happening there on the concrete floor above of the bedroom. And that was the cause that eventually everything was wrenched down along with that in this room. So many engineers say that Florida is collapsing in on itself. So basically there's over 6,500 sinkhole insurance claims that are being reported each year. And that is causing a boom for geologists in Florida, but also for lawyers in Florida that are fighting for the homeowners that they get enough money from the insurance. So it's a sinkhole business, basically. So of course, since more and more people are moving to Florida and more subdivisions are being built, more and more sinkholes are being noticed. Because before, if it was bare land, maybe sinkholes went unnoticed, they filled up with water and people just thought, oh, there's a pond, right? And also farmers, if there is excessive groundwater pumping, especially in the winter months, they're saying that strawberry farmers, for example, if there's a sudden cold snap, they're pumping groundwater onto their plants because it's warmer to save them. And then if the aquifers, if the water levels are really drained, this can also be a reason why all of a sudden there's many sinkholes forming in some areas. But also the development, more and more development in Florida seems to be a problem. So I find this sounds quite worrisome to me, especially when I look at areas where we basically have the center of all these sinkholes: Ocala, Orlando, Tampa. And I know because I've been watching the Ocala horse community for a few years, and it's basically has exploded there with new subdivision, not only horse related. A lot of horse farms are being lost and turned into subdivision with more and more homes, more and more houses. So I think in the coming years, in the near future, there will probably be even more reports of homes that are being sucked up by sinkholes. And yeah, I thought I'll let you know as a tourist, what do you do? I don't know, guys, really. I mean, Florida is beautiful. What are your chances, right? You could walk through a street and a brick could fall in your head, or you could have a car accident. I think it's still safe to go there on vacation and safe to live there. Just be careful and watch out where you buy a home. But that's anywhere, right? You need to see, am I in a flood zone, earthquakes, volcanoes, right? So I don't think it's super safe in most places in the world. So something's always happening, tornadoes, hurricanes, whatever. But it helps to be aware of the problem, to maybe be prepared and be cautious and monitor things, right? So there are ways to monitor changes in your home, visible changes, but maybe there's also, you can rent some instruments that detect changes earlier. So that was my update for today, another sinkhole update. You guys wanted to learn more about that. So I hope you liked it, guys. If that was the case, leave it a like. Check out the videos in the end screen. The volcanoes are rumbling all over the world. It's crazy. I hope I see you very, very soon, guys. Bye-bye.